try to respect the land, doing agriculture, thinking of, not just the product that we want to grow, but considering the environmental that we live in, because if we do something wrong, we don't do just to the land, we do to ourselves, and protecting and doing things in a more sustainable way, I think it's more appropriate.
Claudia Perita, owner of Woman Vineyard, has been working with the Agricultural Stewardship Program on implementing best management practices to protect ground and surface waters and to preserve her agricultural heritage. Originally from Calabria, Italy, Claudia has learned most of her farming practices from her family, especially her father, Domenico. Longing for a simpler life, more like what she grew up with in Italy, Claudia gave up the restaurant industry, a business she originally moved to Long Island for, to get back to her roots.
Yeah, I never felt like I was home, that this was my home. And after I started planting and had the house over here, having the water on one side and land on the other makes me feel home again. So,
in Italy?
In Italy, yeah.
That's beautiful.
When I have my fig trees, I have my olive trees, I have my walnut trees.
Woman Vineyard was one of 6 vineyards picked for a grant given by the Long Island Sound Futures Fund called Engaging Vineyards to implement a stewardship program. Claudia has embraced the program.
Tell me about your relationship with Becky and the Agriculture Stewardship Program.
Alice Weiss from the viticulture program in Riverhead, she approached me last year and she said, Claudia, they're running to get a grant to get weather stations set up into farms, and they want to they're considering doing to see the effect of the sound into the grapes. And because I'm close to the sound, I say you will be a good candidate for it to be part of it. So Becky got the grant and I got to be in the program. They send somebody once a week since they installed the weather station to do scouting in 2 of my fields. And it's good because I do the scouting to all the vineyard, but it's good to have somebody else, notice other things that I might don't see, and write it them down, because I'm not so good on put things down on paper quickly. Because I'm always
You're busy.
I'm busy and being the only one that I don't have to report to anybody else. If I find an issue, I have to be the one resolving it.
Being a really great winemaker entails drilling deep into a specific region and finding out how it ticks, or what makes it tick. And that includes climate, soil, conditions, sunlight, the 4 seasons, and all of those factors involved make up what we call a terroir. And those are the conditions we work in. We have our own terroir on Long Island. Every place in the world has a specific terroir, and essentially that's the climate and soil and how it affects the flavor of wine.
Across the board, weather stations have been hugely popular with growers for a number of reasons. One is the ability to check in real time what's going on in your vineyard, especially from a remote location. So you can look for temperature, you can look for wind speed, you can look for rainfall. All of these things can impact, during the growing season, can impact your pest management decisions. In winter, when we get down into the single digits, that's a time when we worry about winter injury, and so the stations are very useful in helping to determine if that's a concern or not, because if winter injury occurs, growers have to make adjustments in pruning. So all those things are very important, just the weather data itself. And then the weather data feeds into these disease and insect models that Cornell University and others have put together and that are based in the NIWA system. And these disease and insect models are useful. They're not the final word in pest management, but they are a very important tool that helps growers understand whether they've had a disease infection period or not, or whether what the insect phenology is, and whether they should be concerned, whether they should commence a scouting program. All of these things can be derived based on the weather data provided by the weather station. So they're actually quite valuable.
We have this incredible population for bug-eating bugs, which then, when I do get a population of problematic bugs up here in my canopy, these bug-eating bugs will come up from this meadow and start foraging the heck out of these bugs, and this population will crash. So it's a really beautiful form of natural insect control, and that's something that the weather station can really help us with, because I can know after certain days of heat accumulation, which is called growing degree days, and the weather station tracks that, there's certain bug hatchings happening. So for instance, if it's a very hot year, I bet I'm going to get leaf hoppers early. Cornell has really helped a lot with this, because we do have a problem here with grape berry moth, and it's the larvae of the moth that will eat our fruit. And they have a biofix date, which means that it's simply a date that they've chosen according to when something is happening to a plant. So they use a wild grapevine that is blooming. So they kind of take this date and then track the growing degree days, and we know when the first generation of these larvae are going to hatch and start eating our fruit. So the whole region can go in and treat all in the same week for this larvae. So as a region-wide control, we can start controlling this bug that's really giving us a problem out here.
Scouting is basically a systematic walking of the vineyard and looking for insects and diseases. The idea is to catch things early in their cycle, because at that point, if treatment is necessary, it's much easier to control something that's not an epidemic. Kinds of things we scout for are fungal diseases, probably the two most prominent being downy mildew and powdery mildew. Those have the ability to cause tremendous amount of crop loss, to affect quality in a negative way. And in the case of downy mildew, if it gets out of hand, it can defoliate vines. And that not only affects ripening, it also can render the vine a lot more susceptible to winter injury, because the vine loses the ability to assimilate carbohydrates in preparation for winter. So those are the main diseases we look for. On the insect side, there are several very important ones, grape berry moth being the most important, because it not only leads to direct crop loss, but also it provides entry points for fungal organisms.
Before IPM, many growers just kind of prophylactically controlled for insects and diseases without really knowing if they were going to be a problem or not. Part of having a weather station and scouts and integrated pest management means that we have to keep good records. And having a history of information going back for many years in this region gives us a model to go and work with. If we know that certain conditions are coming, we'll know that certain insects and diseases are potentially a threat. And so record keeping has to be a big part of any weather station plan and management plan for that. Also, with our new program here on Long Island, which is Long Island Sustainable Wine Growing, it requires growers to use integrated pest management for their insect and disease control programs. The amount of materials that can be used, the toxicity levels of materials that we are using are much lower and limited, and because of that, and because of the expense, growers have to be very judicious in when they use it and how they use certain insect and disease control measures, because it takes time, it costs a lot of money, and if it's not done at the right time, it's not going to be effective. So all of that is very closely tied to having good, sound weather information that can allow us to then make those proper decisions. So again, these stations are really necessary for us to work with and extremely important for us to have the ability to make good, sound, educated decisions in the vineyard. And when we do that, we're going to have much better wine to work with and make much better wine in the bottle at the end of the day.
Growers in Suffolk County are facing some of the biggest issues that they've ever had to face before. And that is the 21st century challenge of how to grow specialty crops and grow them in a way that is fundamentally sustainable. And it makes it even more complicated because we're growing crops in a maritime climate. We're surrounded by water on all sides, and we're growing many, many different kinds of specialty crops. Another issue that we're dealing with is how to protect our groundwater and surface water from agricultural contaminants, whether it's pesticides or nutrients. That is another big issue that we have here in Suffolk County. And then the third thing is of being able to provide a comprehensive pest management program for specialty crop producers. Many times growers in the Midwest or even the far west states are growing commodity crops, and so there's a lot of research that's gone into developing pest and nutrient management programs for commodity crops, but there's a lack of research and programs introduced for specialty crop producers, and that is the primary crops that we grow here on Long Island. So those are three problems that our growers are facing.
So I think one of the most important spokes in the wheel maybe is Alice Wise, because she has really risen over the last decade to be someone who is able to very eloquently introduce and discuss sustainable practices in vineyards, and she's really adopted many different practices, sustainable practices that commercial growers like I have, and learn them, understand them, and then take them into her research vineyard and be able to conduct replicated studies with our practices and see what works and what doesn't work, or perhaps how something needs to be tweaked so that it works better. And her enthusiasm in general is really amazing. I mean, just untiring enthusiasm. And for me, it's been really great to see a huge evolution take place out here on the North and South Forks.
Well, this plays exactly into the Sustainable Wine Growing Program. The Sustainable Program is focused on producing high-quality fruit, but also trying to do it in a way that is environmentally sensitive, in a way that is provides stewardship of the land. And so it's tremendously important to not make a rash decision about pest management, to take in all the information that one can, and then that helps in the decision-making process for a pest management schedule. And so this plays right into the Sustainable Wine Growing Program. Having this kind of supplemental information and data is exactly what all growers should be doing, but in particular growers that are trying to grow sustainably.
And what we've been able to achieve through the course of this grant is truly the cutting edge of modern agriculture. And we're being able to demonstrate that it is possible for our growers in specialty crops to be able to grow a sustainable crop in our maritime environment and climate.